The most dangerous mistake Vincent Moretti made that night was believing Emily Carter would choose safety over the truth. At 2:17 in the morning, Moretti Tower was nearly silent, its 42 floors reduced to empty hallways, dim security lights, and the distant hum of ventilation systems pushing warm air against the Chicago winter. Emily sat alone outside Vincent's office, her worn leather briefcase open beside her chair and 3 pension statements spread across the desk. She had been comparing archived payment records for nearly 4 hours when a red notification appeared on her monitor. Scheduled archive maintenance. Selected records would be permanently removed in 72 hours. Emily stared at the screen. The maintenance order had been approved 6 weeks earlier, yet the authorization code belonged to an executive who had retired 8 months ago. She opened the affected directory. Pension audits, employee complaints, vendor transfers. Every file she had been examining was scheduled to disappear. Emily reached for her phone, then stopped. Her desk drawer was slightly open. She always closed it before leaving for coffee. Inside lay a white envelope she had never seen before. No stamp, no name. She opened it carefully. A photograph showed her entering her apartment building the previous evening. Beneath it, one sentence had been printed in black ink. Stop before the records disappear with you. Emily did not scream. She did not run. She placed the photograph beside the pension statements and called Daniel Brooks, Moretti's head of security. Lock the archive access logs, she said. Do not change permissions. Preserve everything exactly as it is. Emily, what happened? Someone knows what I found. The private elevator opened before Daniel arrived. Vincent stepped onto the floor wearing a charcoal overcoat above an open-collar white shirt. He had been called from his lakefront residence 12 minutes earlier. His eyes moved from Emily to the photograph, then to the red countdown on her monitor. 71 hours and 48 minutes remained. You are leaving Chicago tonight, he said. Emily closed the envelope. No, Vincent looked at her as if refusal were a language no one had ever taught him. This is not a discussion. Then you are talking to yourself. Daniel arrived and stopped near the elevator, sensing the distance between them. Vincent picked up the photograph. His expression remained controlled, but Emily knew him well enough to recognize what lived beneath that silence. Fear made Vincent colder, not louder. A secured residence is ready within the hour, he said. Private transportation. Limited communication. No predictable movements. Emily turned the monitor toward him. These records disappear in 72 hours. Records can be recovered. Not if the backup system is compromised. Your safety comes first. Emily stood. She was 5 feet 6 inches tall, nearly a foot shorter than Vincent, but nothing in her posture suggested surrender. Thomas Reed lost almost 40% of his pension. I found 27 more employees with the same pattern. Someone moved their money through companies connected to people inside your organization. Vincent's eyes hardened. Who? I am still proving that. Then give me everything you have. I will give it to independent counsel, pension regulators, and employee representatives through documented channels. Emily, if you take control now, whoever changed that maintenance schedule will know exactly where to look. Vincent stepped closer to the desk, but stopped several feet from her. Someone photographed you outside your home. And someone is trying to erase evidence from your company. The red countdown continued moving. 71 hours and 46 minutes. Vincent looked at the woman who had managed his schedule, corrected his mistakes, remembered every employee name he forgot, and challenged him when everyone else remained silent. For 6 years, he had trusted Emily with every important detail of his life. Now she was asking him to trust her with the one thing he could not tolerate losing. You are leaving Chicago tonight, he repeated. Emily placed the threatening photograph inside her briefcase and closed it. Her eyes remained steady. No, Vincent. The records are leaving first. 2 weeks earlier, Thomas Reed had entered. Moretti Tower carrying a pension statement folded so many times the paper had softened along the creases. Emily remembered him immediately. He had supervised the Southside warehouse for 23 years before retiring, and every December he delivered homemade cookies to the night security staff because, as he once told her, nobody should work through Christmas without knowing someone remembered them. That morning, however, Thomas did not smile. My payment changed, he said quietly. Emily invited him to sit beside her desk. His monthly pension deposit had fallen by nearly 40% without a clear explanation. The benefits department had sent him 3 automated responses and closed his appeal twice. Emily examined the statement, then opened the Authorized Employee Benefits portal. The deduction appeared as an administrative adjustment connected to an outside consulting agreement. "Did you approve any changes to your pension plan?" she asked. No, Emily searched older records. The same adjustment appeared in 27 retired employee accounts. Different amounts, different dates, the same vendor code. By noon, she had traced the payments to 3 consulting companies registered in Delaware. Their public records revealed layers of ownership that ended with another management company connected to Marcus Hale, a corporate fixer Vincent had trusted for years to negotiate difficult acquisitions and resolve disputes before they reached court. Emily did not accuse Marcus. She documented everything. She saved authorized copies of pension statements, vendor agreements, payment histories, and internal approval records. Then she contacted Sarah Mitchell, an independent pension attorney whose firm had no business relationship with Moretti companies. "I need you to review documents before I make any formal allegation," Emily said. "And Vincent?" Sarah asked. Emily looked through the glass wall of his office. Vincent was speaking with 3 executives, one hand resting beside an untouched cup of coffee. "Not until I know whether his internal reporting system is compromised." Sarah was silent for a moment. "You understand what you are suggesting." "I understand. What the records suggest. That is not the same thing." Over the next 13 days, Emily continued working normally. She managed Vincent's meetings, corrected travel schedules, answered employee questions, and quietly expanded her review. She found pension deductions hidden beneath consulting fees, administrative charges, and investment adjustments. Every trail eventually touched a company connected to Marcus. Emily created 3 evidence packages and stored them through separate lawful channels. One would go to Sarah. One would go to independent pension regulators if the records were authenticated. The third would remain available to employee representatives. She told no one where all 3 packages were stored. On the 14th night, she stayed late to verify the archive records one final time. That was when the red countdown appeared. Now, standing beside her desk at 2:31 in the morning, Emily watched Daniel preserve the access logs while Vincent made 3 calls arranging transportation and a secured residence. "I told you I am not leaving," she said. Vincent ended the final call. "And I heard you. Then why are you arranging a car?" "Because hearing you and agreeing with you are different things." Emily closed her briefcase. "Thomas Reed trusted me because nobody else listened. Thomas Reed will still have a pension if you are alive to help him. And 27 families may lose evidence while you hide me somewhere comfortable." Vincent looked toward the monitor. 71 hours and 34 minutes remained. "Give Daniel the evidence locations." "No, Emily. The fewer people who know, the safer the records are." Vincent turned toward Daniel. "Increase security around her apartment, office, and every scheduled destination." Emily's expression changed. "Do not build a cage around me. I am building protection. Those are not always the same thing." Vincent said nothing. His silence told Emily he had already made the decision. At 2:38 in the morning, Daniel received an alert from building security. A dark sedan had been recorded near Emily's apartment 3 times during the previous 48 hours. The license plate belonged to a vehicle, reported stolen 6 months earlier. Vincent read the report once. Then he looked at Emily. "You are coming with me." Emily held his gaze. "For tonight. But the investigation continues." Vincent nodded, already planning how to remove every risk around her. What he did not understand was that by sunrise, his protection would begin interfering with the very plan Emily had built to expose the truth. By 6:40 that morning, the Chicago skyline had turned pale silver beyond the windows of Vincent's secured lakefront residence. Emily had slept less than an hour. Her worn leather briefcase remained beside her chair, and Vincent had placed 2 security professionals near the elevator, another in the lobby, and a driver in the underground garage. Every entrance was monitored. Every visitor required approval. Emily stood at the kitchen counter reading the latest archive report on a secured laptop Daniel had provided. 67 hours remained. "My meeting with Sarah is at 9, she said. Vincent looked up from his untouched coffee. It was canceled. Emily slowly closed the laptop. "By whom?" "By me. You had no authority to cancel that meeting. Someone followed you home. Sarah is independent counsel. She needs the authenticated records. She can review them remotely. Not all of them. Some documents require verification against the physical backup system. Vincent set down his cup. You are not returning to Moretti Tower until Daniel clears the threat. Emily studied him. And how long will that take? As long as necessary. That is not a plan. That is confinement with expensive furniture. Vincent's expression tightened. You agreed to come here. For one night. The circumstances changed. No. Your fear changed. The room went silent. Vincent turned toward Daniel. Replace Emily's work phone with a secured device. Restrict access to company systems until we know which accounts are compromised. Emily stared at him. Do not touch my phone. It may be monitored. Then preserve it as evidence and give me another device. Do not remove my access without documenting why. Vincent did not answer. Daniel hesitated, but Vincent's decision had already been made. By 7:15, Emily's scheduled calls had been canceled, her company access limited, and the meeting with Sarah postponed. Vincent believed he was reducing risk. Emily saw something else. Every decision removed another piece of her ability to protect the evidence. At 8:03, Sarah called Daniel's secured line. The archive schedule changed again, she said. Emily stood immediately. How much time? 48 hours. Vincent looked toward the laptop. The red countdown had accelerated. 47 hours and 57 minutes remained. Who authorized it? Emily asked. The approval came through an emergency maintenance order connected to Marcus Hale's consulting office. Vincent's face became still. Marcus does not control archive maintenance. Apparently someone gave him enough access to influence it, Sarah replied. Emily looked directly at Vincent. This is what I was trying to prevent. You are protected here. My body is protected. The evidence is disappearing. Vincent walked toward the windows. I can stop the maintenance order. If you use executive authority without preserving the approval chain, Marcus will know exactly how much we discovered. I am not going to stand here while someone threatens you. Then stop standing in front of me. Vincent turned. Emily's voice remained calm, but the disappointment in her eyes carried more weight than anger. You canceled independent counsel. You restricted my access. You changed my communication channels without consulting me. You protected my body and endangered the evidence. Vincent said nothing. Thomas trusted me because I listened before deciding what he needed. Emily continued. You have spent 4 hours deciding everything for me. Because I will not gamble with your safety. And I will not let your fear erase 28 families. Daniel's phone vibrated. He read the new message twice before speaking. There is another problem. Thomas Reed received a formal legal notice this morning. He has withdrawn permission to use his statement. Emily closed her eyes for 1 second. Vincent looked at Daniel. Who contacted him? A law firm representing one of Marcus Hale's companies. Emily picked up her briefcase. I need to speak with Sarah. Vincent moved toward the doorway. You are staying here. Emily stopped several feet from him. Vincent, if you keep making decisions without me, someone weaker will pay for every mistake. The red countdown continued moving. 47 hours and 49 minutes remained. Outside, Chicago was beginning another ordinary morning. Inside the secured residence, Vincent believed he had finally placed Emily beyond danger. He had not yet realized that his protection was becoming the greatest obstacle between her and the truth. At 10:26 that morning, Vincent stood alone in the residence library with Marcus Hale's financial history displayed across a secured tablet. Emily remained in the adjoining room with Daniel, speaking to Sarah through a protected line. 45 hours and 34 minutes remained. Vincent had spent his life believing delay was weakness. When someone threatened his organization, he moved first and forced everyone else to react. That instinct had built his reputation, protected his companies, and convinced him that hesitation was more dangerous than error. He called Jonathan Mercer, a financial intermediary who had arranged several consulting agreements for Marcus. I need the location of every backup connected to Hale's companies, Vincent said. Jonathan hesitated. That is not information I can provide. Then tell Marcus I am reviewing every contract he has touched in the last 5 years. Vincent, if this is about the pension accounts, you should speak with counsel. Vincent became silent. Jonathan had said too much. I never mentioned pension accounts. The call ended 30 seconds later. Vincent believed he had gained confirmation. What he had actually done was tell Marcus that the investigation had reached him. At 11:08, Sarah called Emily again. Someone attempted unauthorized access to our case management system. Emily stood beside the window, gripping the secured phone. Did they get anything? No. Our system blocked the attempt, but the timing is not accidental. Daniel looked toward Vincent. Did anyone contact Marcus or his associates? Emily asked. Vincent did not answer. Immediately. That silence was enough. Who did you call? She asked. Jonathan Mercer. Emily stared at him. You contacted an intermediary connected to Marcus without telling me. He confirmed Marcus knew about the pension accounts. Because you gave him enough information to understand what we were investigating. I was trying to locate the backups. There are no missing backups. The physical archive server is inside Moretti Tower. The problem is authentication and preservation before the deletion deadline. Vincent set the tablet down. You never told me that. Because every time you learn one piece of information, you act before hearing the rest. Daniel's phone vibrated. He read the message and looked at Emily. Thomas Reed will not speak with anyone connected to Moretti companies. His attorney says he believes cooperating could expose his family to financial consequences. Emily lowered her eyes. Thomas had spent 23 years working for Vincent's organization. He had trusted Emily enough to bring her the statement that started everything. Now he was afraid to speak. Every time you move without me, someone weaker pays for it, Emily said. Vincent froze mid-word. No accusation could have struck deeper because the evidence was standing between them. Sarah's office had been targeted. Thomas had withdrawn. Marcus knew the investigation was real. Vincent had acted to protect Emily and had made the truth harder to preserve. What do you need? He asked. Emily looked at him. I needed you to ask that 6 hours ago. I am asking now. I need independent counsel. I need access to the physical backup server. I need Thomas protected through legal channels he trusts. And I need you to stop contacting anyone connected to Marcus. Vincent nodded once. Done. Emily picked up her briefcase. No, not done. She walked toward Daniel. I am leaving this residence. Vincent stepped forward, then stopped himself. The security assessment has not changed. Neither has the deadline. Emily, there is still a credible threat. Then document it. Give me the information, and let me decide what risks I accept. Vincent looked at Daniel. You cannot help her leave. Daniel remained silent for several seconds. She is not being detained. She has the legal right to leave. The room went quiet. Vincent had surrounded Emily with security, restricted her communications, canceled her meetings, and called it protection. Now the simplest truth was the one he could not command away. At 11:42, Emily left through the secured garage with Daniel accompanying her to a nonprofit legal center where Sarah was waiting. Vincent remained beside the library window, watching the vehicle disappear into Chicago traffic. 44 hours and 18 minutes remained. For the first time since the threat appeared, Vincent did nothing. Then he looked at Emily's untouched coffee on the table and understood the cost of his certainty. He had spent the morning refusing to lose her. By noon, he had become the reason she no longer trusted him to stand beside her. At 1:18 that afternoon, Emily entered the nonprofit legal center carrying her worn leather briefcase and the secured laptop Daniel had provided. Sarah Mitchell was waiting inside a small conference room with 2 independent forensic specialists and a pension compliance advisor. 35 hours and 42 minutes remained. Emily placed 3 sealed evidence packages on the table. One package contains authenticated pension statements and vendor records, she said. The second contains copies for outside counsel and regulators. The third contains employee records that cannot be distributed until we verify the physical archive server. Sarah opened a procedural checklist. What do you need from Moretti Tower? Direct access to the backup server, the original archive logs, and the hardware authentication key stored in the records department. Daniel looked at Emily. Vincent can authorize access. That is exactly the problem. If he overrides normal procedures, Marcus can argue the evidence was improperly handled or altered. Sarah nodded. Then we obtain independent preservation authority and enter with forensic witnesses. At 2:03, the legal team began preparing emergency preservation requests and formal notices to prevent further deletion. Emily contacted employee representatives and arranged secure delivery of the first evidence package. She also asked Sarah to reach Thomas Reed through his attorney, making one condition clear. No one connected to Vincent would pressure Thomas to cooperate. At 3:11, Daniel received a message from Vincent. Is Emily safe? Daniel showed her the screen. Emily looked at it for several seconds. Tell him I am working. Daniel typed the response. Vincent did not send another message. By 4:26, Sarah confirmed that the legal notices had been filed and independent forensic specialists were ready to accompany Emily to Moretti Tower. 32 hours and 14 minutes remained. Then the compliance advisor discovered another problem. The authentication key is scheduled for replacement tomorrow morning, he said. Once the replacement occurs, the current archive signatures may become harder to verify without additional review. Emily looked at the schedule. Who requested the replacement? Emergency Infrastructure Maintenance. Same consulting authorization chain connected to Marcus. Sarah closed the folder. Then you need to enter the tower tonight. Emily nodded. Daniel stepped into the hallway and called Vincent. He returned 3 minutes later. Vincent wants to send 12 security professionals and close 3 floors of the building. Emily shook her head. That announces exactly where we are going. He said the threat assessment remains active. Then he can protect building access without interfering with the forensic process. Daniel studied her. You know he will come himself. That is his decision. At 5:02, Emily left the legal center with Sarah and the forensic specialists. Chicago traffic moved slowly beneath a gray winter sky. 31 hours and 58 minutes remained. Across the city, Vincent stood inside his office reading the legal preservation notices. For the first time, he did not call an intermediary. He did not issue a private threat. He did not cancel Emily's plan. He asked Daniel one question. Where does she need me? Daniel answered. She needs the building access logs preserved, lawful transportation available, witnesses protected through independent counsel, and no executive interference. Vincent remained silent. And she needs you to tell her before you do anything, Daniel added. At 5:19, Vincent authorized preservation of every access log connected to the pension archives and transferred control of the relevant security records to independent counsel. Then he canceled the order to close 3 floors. When Emily arrived at Moretti Tower, Vincent was waiting in the lobby alone. No security formation, no executive entourage, no commands. Emily stopped several feet from him. Why are you here? She asked. Vincent looked at the briefcase in her hand, then at the independent specialists standing behind her. Because I finally understand that keeping you safe does not mean taking your place. Emily said nothing. Tell me what you need, Vincent continued. And this time, I will listen before I move. The lobby fell silent around them. Emily held his gaze for several seconds, measuring whether the man before her had truly changed or simply learned new words. Then she handed him a single-page security protocol. Preserve every entrance log. Keep Marcus and his representatives away from the archive floor through documented company procedures. Protect Thomas through the attorney he chose. Do not contact anyone without telling me. Vincent accepted the paper. Anything else? Emily turned toward the elevators. Yes. Stand where I ask you to stand. Vincent followed at a respectful distance. 31 hours and 41 minutes remained. For the first time since the countdown began, Emily was not fighting Vincent's protection and Marcus's interference at the same time. But as the elevator climbed toward the archive floor, Sarah received a new message. Marcus Hale had filed an emergency legal challenge to block access to the physical backup server. The elevator stopped on the archive floor at 5:27 that evening, but no one stepped out. Sarah held up her phone and read the emergency legal challenge twice. Marcus Hale claimed the pension records contained confidential information belonging to outside companies and argued that any access without judicial review could damage protected business interests. Emily looked at the countdown on the secured laptop. 31 hours and 33 minutes remained. Can he stop us? Vincent asked. Sarah shook her head. He can delay us if we respond carelessly. Vincent looked toward the closed elevator doors. A day earlier, he would have ordered security to open the archive room and removed anyone who objected. Emily could see the instinct in his face. Do not override the challenge, she said. Vincent turned toward her. I was not going to. Emily held his gaze for a moment. Good. Sarah contacted outside counsel while the forensic specialists reviewed the preservation notices. The legal challenge applied to records controlled by Marcus's consulting companies, but the physical backup server belonged to Moretti Holdings and contained employee pension records the company had a documented obligation to preserve. Emily opened the authorization history. The emergency maintenance order changed the deletion schedule, she said. But the original retention policy still requires preservation during an active benefits dispute. Sarah looked at the screen. Thomas filed his appeal before the maintenance order. Exactly. Vincent understood immediately. The company had a preservation duty before Marcus changed the schedule. Emily nodded. Which means we do not need you to create new authority. We need you to honor the authority that already existed. Vincent called the records director and placed the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. He instructed her to preserve the archive room, suspend routine maintenance affecting disputed pension files, and document every action for independent review. He did not mention Marcus. He did not threaten anyone. He followed Emily's protocol exactly. At 6:14, the elevator doors opened. Independent counsel entered first, followed by the forensic specialists, Emily, Sarah, and Vincent. Daniel remained near the access corridor, preserving security logs and documenting every person who entered or left. Inside the archive room, rows of equipment produced a steady mechanical hum. Emily placed her briefcase on a table and handed the forensic team the identification numbers she had recorded during her original review. We need the original archive logs, hardware authentication records, and pension directories connected to the 28 affected accounts. One specialist entered the preservation request. The system rejected it. Administrative authorization required, he said. Vincent stepped forward. Emily looked at him. He stopped. Tell me where to stand. The words were quiet. Emily pointed toward the secondary terminal. Authorize preservation access only. Do not open the files. Do not change permissions. Vincent followed her instructions. The system accepted the request. For the next 6 hours, Emily worked beside the forensic team while Vincent remained available without directing the investigation. At 11:48, Sarah received confirmation that Thomas Reed's attorney had agreed to reconsider cooperation because all future communication would go through independent counsel. Shortly after midnight, the forensic specialists found the first decisive irregularity. Archive timestamps showed that pension records had been altered after employee appeals were filed, and the maintenance schedule had been accelerated from 72 hours to 48 hours through credentials connected to Marcus's consulting office. Vincent read the report in silence. Is it enough? He asked. Enough to preserve the entire archive and request broader independent review, Sarah said. Not enough to declare anyone guilty. Vincent nodded. Then we do not declare anyone guilty. Emily looked at him. It was the first time she had heard Vincent choose restraint when certainty would have been easier. At 2:36 in the morning, 23 hours and 41 minutes remained. The forensic team began creating verified preservation copies for independent counsel and regulators. Then Daniel entered the archive room carrying a printed access report. We have another problem. Emily looked up. What happened? Daniel placed the report on the table. Someone submitted a second maintenance order scheduled to begin at 6 tomorrow morning. It would disconnect the physical backup server for replacement. Vincent looked at Emily. What do you need? Emily studied the report, then the countdown. We need every evidence. Package authenticated and distributed before 6. Vincent checked the clock. Less than 4 hours remained before the server replacement order would begin. Then tell me where to stand. Emily closed her briefcase and looked around the room at Sarah, Daniel, the forensic specialists, and finally Vincent. Beside me. But follow the plan. For the first time, Vincent did not ask what would happen if the plan failed. He simply nodded. And while the city slept beneath the winter sky, the most powerful man in the building waited for Emily Carter to tell him what came next. At 2:41 in the morning, Emily divided the remaining work into 4 separate channels. Sarah would supervise legal distribution to pension regulators and outside counsel. The forensic specialist would complete authenticated preservation copies and document every transfer. Daniel would maintain building access records, protect the chain of custody, and coordinate lawful security for Thomas Reed through the attorney Thomas had chosen. Vincent would authorize only the company actions Emily identified as necessary. 23 hours and 36 minutes remained on the original archive countdown, but the replacement order would begin in 3 hours and 19 minutes. Once the copies are authenticated, they leave simultaneously, Emily said. No single office holds everything. No single person controls the evidence. Vincent looked at the distribution plan. Including me. Especially you. 6 years earlier, the answer would have offended him. That morning, he simply nodded. At 3:08, the first preservation copy completed verification. At 3:26, the second package was ready. Then the archive system displayed a new administrative notice. Access to the disputed pension directories would be suspended at 4 in the morning pending review of Marcus Hale's emergency challenge. Vincent reached for his phone. Emily looked at him. He stopped. What do you need? Document the notice. Send it to Sarah. Preserve the system screen through the forensic team. Vincent followed every instruction. Sarah reviewed the challenge and discovered the suspension request relied on a consulting agreement that had expired 11 months earlier. Outside counsel submitted the documented response. At 3:47, the suspension was withdrawn. No threats, no private pressure, no executive shortcuts, only records, procedure, and patience. At 4:12, Thomas Reed's attorney called Sarah. Thomas had agreed to restore his statement after learning that Vincent had transferred control of the investigation to independent counsel. Emily closed her eyes for 1 second. Tell him thank you, she said. And tell him nobody from Moretti Holdings will contact him directly. Vincent heard her and said nothing. At 4:39, the final evidence package entered authentication. The system estimated 48 minutes. Vincent stood near the secondary terminal while Emily reviewed the distribution list. Regulators, outside counsel, employee representatives, he said. And the independent pension specialist retained by Thomas's attorney, Emily added. 4 destinations. For doors Marcus cannot close at once. Emily looked at him. That is why I never needed you to break down one door. Vincent accepted the words without defending himself. At 5:03, Daniel reported that Marcus had arrived in the lobby with 2 attorneys and demanded access to the archive floor. Vincent looked toward the elevator. The building belongs to my company. The investigation does not, Emily said. Vincent nodded. He instructed Daniel to follow documented visitor restrictions and direct Marcus's attorneys to outside counsel. Marcus remained in the lobby. At 5:21, the authentication process reached 92%. Then the server connection slowed. One forensic specialist checked the hardware monitor. The replacement process may be starting early. Emily looked at the clock. 39 minutes remained until 6. Can we complete authentication? If the connection remains stable. Vincent stepped toward the terminal, then stopped. Is there anything I can authorize? The specialist shook his head. Nothing without changing the environment we are preserving. Vincent moved back. For perhaps the first time in his life, the most useful thing he could do was nothing. At 5:42, the package reached 99%. The room became silent. At 5:47, authentication completed. Emily gave Sarah the signal. For verified evidence, packages were transmitted through independent secure channels. Confirmation arrived from outside counsel, then regulators, then employee representatives. The final confirmation came from Thomas's pension specialist at 5:53. Emily looked at the clock. 7 minutes remained. The files are out, Sarah said. Vincent released a breath he had been holding for hours. At 5:58, the server displayed the replacement notice. The forensic specialists disconnected their preservation equipment and documented the final system state. At 6 in the morning, the maintenance process began under independent observation. Nothing important remained trapped inside a single machine. Marcus could delay an investigation. He could challenge procedures. He could dispute findings. But he could no longer make the evidence disappear. Emily closed her worn leather briefcase. Vincent looked at her. Are you safe now? Emily glanced toward the windows where the first morning light was spreading across Chicago. The records are safe. Thomas is protected. The investigation can continue. That was not what I asked. Emily met his eyes. Then you are finally asking the right question. But safety is not something you get to declare for me. Vincent remained silent. Emily walked toward the elevator, then stopped beside him. You did what I asked tonight. I should have done it sooner. Yes. The elevator doors opened. Vincent did not follow until Emily looked back and said, You can stand beside me now. By 9:30 that morning, the verified evidence packages had reached every independent destination Emily selected. Pension regulators confirmed receipt. Outside counsel opened a formal review. Employee representatives received protected copies of the records affecting retired workers, and Thomas Reed's pension specialist began comparing the preserved files against years of payment histories. Emily remained at Moretti Tower, sitting inside the main conference room with Sarah, Daniel, the forensic specialists, and Vincent. Her worn leather briefcase rested beside her chair. She had been awake for More than 24 hours, but her voice remained steady. The evidence survived, she said. Now the system has to answer for what the evidence shows. At 11:15, the independent forensic team issued its preliminary findings. 28 pension accounts contained irregular deductions routed through consulting companies connected to Marcus Hale's network. Archive records had been altered after employee appeals were submitted. Maintenance schedules had been accelerated through credentials linked to Marcus's consulting office. The findings did not establish final guilt, but they justified broader investigation, immediate preservation orders, and suspension of relevant company access. Vincent read the report without speaking. Marcus loses access pending independent review, Sarah said. The pension accounts should receive temporary protections while regulators determine the full scope of the losses. Vincent nodded. Document everything. No exceptions. At noon, Marcus's access to Moretti systems and facilities was formally suspended through company procedures. Relevant findings were transferred to appropriate authorities and regulatory offices for further review. Vincent did not call Marcus. He did not threaten him. He did not use private influence to decide the outcome. Instead, he signed an order placing every pension contract connected to outside intermediaries under independent examination. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, employees and retirees gathered in the largest meeting room at Moretti Tower. Thomas attended remotely through his attorney. Emily stood at one microphone. Vincent stood at another. For 6 years, she had stood behind him during meetings, carrying schedules, correcting details, and solving problems before anyone noticed. This time, she stood beside him. The failures occurred inside companies carrying my name, Vincent said. Responsibility does not disappear because I did not personally authorize every decision. I allowed systems to operate without enough independent oversight, and people paid for that failure. The room remained silent. Vincent looked toward Emily, but he did not ask her to defend him. Emily opened a folder. Temporary pension. Protections will begin immediately for affected retirees while the independent review continues. Employees may submit complaints directly to outside counsel without executive approval. All future pension oversight will include independent employee representation. One executive near the front objected to the cost. We cannot rebuild every system because 28 accounts raised questions. Vincent looked at him. 28 people were enough to reveal the system was broken. No one answered. Emily continued. I am proposing an independent pension protection office with authority to review benefits disputes, preserve records, and report findings without interference from executive management. Vincent turned toward her. Who controls the office? An independent board with employee representation. And who leads it? If the board approves me, I will. Vincent nodded. Then submit the proposal today. Emily held his gaze. You understand that the office may investigate decisions made by you. That is why it must exist. The room went silent again. At 5:40 that evening, Emily returned to her desk outside Vincent's office. The threatening photograph remained sealed with the preserved evidence. The red archive countdown had disappeared from her monitor. Vincent stepped out of his office carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one beside her. Are you going home? He asked. After I finish the proposal. Security can drive you. Emily looked at him. Vincent waited. He did not order. He did not decide. I will accept transportation tonight, she said. Tomorrow, we review the risk assessment together. Agreed. Emily picked up the coffee. You are learning. Vincent looked through the glass wall toward the employees still meeting with independent advisors. Slowly, Emily closed her laptop and placed the proposal inside her briefcase. The records were safe. The investigation had begun. Marcus could no longer control the evidence through silence and delay. But the greatest change inside Moretti Tower was quieter than any public announcement. For the first time, Vincent Moretti understood that protecting Emily did not mean keeping her behind him. It meant building a place where she could stand beside him, disagree with him, and remain safe enough to choose her own direction. 6 months later, Emily Carter arrived at the 38th floor of Moretti Tower at 8:12 in the morning, carrying the same worn leather briefcase that had once held the first pension statements. The Independent Pension Protection Office now occupied an entire section of the floor. Retired employees met with benefit specialists. Worker representatives reviewed complaints beside independent attorneys. Every investigation required documented procedures, and no executive, including Vincent, could close a case without board review. Thomas Reed's interim pension payments had been restored while regulators and independent counsel continued the broader recovery process for affected retirees. Marcus Hale remained removed from company access while the investigation and legal proceedings continued through appropriate channels. Emily entered her office and found Vincent waiting outside the open door. He held 2 cups of coffee, but did not enter. "You have a meeting in 10 minutes, he said. Emily looked at the clock. "You remembered my schedule. I had to learn how to manage my own before I could notice anyone else's." She accepted the coffee. "Why are you here?" Vincent handed her a security assessment. Daniel reviewed the current risk level. He recommends transportation after tonight's employee meeting. Emily read the document. "I already reviewed it. And I declined the security detail. I will take my own car." Vincent became silent. 6 months earlier, he would have called Daniel, changed the transportation plan, and placed security around Emily before she could finish speaking. Now he looked at the report again. "Do you understand the remaining risks?" "Yes." "Do you have a check-in plan?" "I will message Daniel when I arrive home." Vincent nodded. "All right." Emily studied him. "That is all. You made an informed decision. You disagree with it." "I do. And you are letting me make it anyway." Vincent looked through the glass wall toward employees speaking freely with pension advisors. "I finally learned that disagreement is not permission to take away your choice." Emily's expression softened. "That is concern. What you did before was control. I know the difference now." At 4:30 that afternoon, the independent board released its first public report. 46 additional pension accounts had required review. Temporary protections had been extended to affected retirees, several outside contracts had been terminated, and restitution proceedings continued under regulatory supervision. Vincent attended the employee meeting but sat in the second row. Emily stood at the front beside Thomas, who had traveled to Chicago with his wife. 6 months ago, "I came here because nobody would explain why my pension changed," Thomas said. "Today, I know there is an office that has to answer when an employee asks a question." The room remained silent for a moment. Then employees stood in quiet recognition. Vincent did not move until Thomas looked toward him. After the meeting, Thomas approached Vincent. "Emily told me you listened eventually." Vincent glanced across the room at her. "Eventually cost people too much." Thomas nodded. "Then remember that." "I will." At 6:18, Emily picked up her briefcase and walked toward the elevator. Vincent followed her into the hallway but stopped several feet from the doors. "Emily." She turned. "Are you safe now?" Emily looked at him for a long moment. "Safer than I was." "That is not the answer I wanted." "It is the truthful one." Vincent nodded. Emily continued. "I am safe because the evidence no longer depends on one person. Employees can speak without asking your permission. Investigations cannot disappear because an executive becomes uncomfortable. And when I make decisions about my own life, you finally listen." The elevator doors opened. Vincent remained where he was. "Text Daniel when you get home." Emily smiled faintly. "I will." She stepped inside, then looked back at him. "Vincent." "Yes." "You refused to stop until I was safe." Vincent waited. "The hardest thing you learned was when to stop." The doors closed. Vincent stood alone in the hallway, understanding what power had taken him years to learn. Protecting Emily had never meant owning her choices, controlling her movements, or standing between her and every risk. It meant making sure truth could survive without sacrifice, justice could continue without fear, and the woman he cared about could walk away freely and still know he would be there if she chose to call. And that evening, Vincent Moretti finally understood that the strongest form of protection was not holding someone close enough to control their path. It was building a world where they could choose their own road home.